Up ahead, our exclusive investigation continues. The government mistake that may be costing you thousands of dollars.
There's going to be a ripple effect. It's going to have impacts all over the city.
So she
Plus, Marcos Villatoro takes a shot at the swine flu.
Every year I wrestle with the question, do I take the flu shot? This year has been the worst.
Tonight we continue our special investigation, Hung Out to Dry. Homeowners across the country are getting hit with bills for flood insurance, insurance they never needed before. Last week, residents in South LA showed us how FEMA's new flood maps put half a block in danger while the other half remained dry. And as correspondent Judy Muller tells us, it's not just Angelenos who are getting soaked.
We began our investigation in South Central Los Angeles, an area 10 miles from the Pacific that hasn't seen flooding in decades.
These homes were built in 1925, and there's never been any instance of flooding.
And yet now it's a special hazard flood area.
Yes, that's it. A special hazard flood area.
Nonetheless, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, declared many parts of the neighborhood hazardous flood zones, costing residents thousands in mandatory flood insurance because, like most of us, they hold federally backed mortgages. Many of those residents were told if they didn't pay up, they could lose their homes.
Let me see, you're paying what now in flood insurance?
Close to $900, about maybe a little over $900.
$1,700.
The payment is over $1,100 a year.
SoCalConnected learned that FEMA had relied on maps almost 40 years old in determining the flood zones and claimed it didn't have the money to update them. And they admitted to us that there were mistakes.
Our scope of work and our funding didn't allow for us to put the brakes on and do a new detailed study. And my 2 feet or 3 feet of water associated with a 100-year flood is purely a guess until we can do a new study and really determine accurately what the flood risk is.
The new FEMA flood zones are a crazy quilt, going uphill, stopping in the middle of streets, including one home, but leaving out the home next door.
But here, I'm not in a flood zone.
You're not in the flood zone here.
But here...
You are in the flood zone. Okay?
Does that make any sense to you?
No, it does not make sense to me.
But the discrepancies may go well beyond South Central. We only had to go an hour north of Los Angeles to find more people angry about FEMA's new flood mapping.
This is the start of the flood zone.
Dave Harris is a resident of Oxnard. He just found out he's living on the wrong side of the tracks.
The magical barrier is the railroad tracks. If you're on this side of the train, you're dry. If you're on the other side of the train, somehow you're wet. Whether or not it's higher or lower doesn't seem to matter.
Nearby, the Santa Clara River sits bone dry and hasn't seen major flooding in 40 years. FEMA predicts the river has a 1% chance of seeing a record level of water. Harris and 1,700 of his neighbors live nearby and will now have to pay flood insurance.
Very big surprise, very big surprise. Seriously, I felt like a fool. Why did I buy a house in a flood zone? I did not know that I was in a flood zone.
Bert Perello is a lifelong resident of Oxnard and is now part of the flood zone. He's also president of the Flood Zone Justice Association. He and these residents formed their group out of frustration with the methods FEMA used to place their neighborhoods in the high-risk zone. According to them, FEMA can't say how much water will flood their streets.
Nobody knows how much water is going to affect each parcel. And those studies were never done or completed, so there's a piece of the puzzle here that they must use that is not being used.
FEMA's process of putting out a map answers the basic question whether someone is or is not in what might be a flood zone. It doesn't answer the question, how deep are they in?
But when we asked FEMA that question, we did get an answer. They sent us this newer map showing the flood levels and fewer homes at risk. But that's little relief to homeowners because for now, FEMA is still calling the entire area a high-risk flood zone. So whether your house is under 1 inch of water or 10 feet, your property values may sink.
I you know, live on a fixed income now. And this really hit me hard because how am I going to sell my home? This is the thing is that it's not just buying flood insurance. It is being stigmatized, living in an area. Nobody wants to touch you with a 10-foot pole, and so you lose property value.
Once everybody goes into this flood zone and we take our 20+% devaluation, all those people are probably going to march down to the assessor's office and say, hey, my house is worth far less than it used to be. Now that I'm in this zone, I want you to lower my property taxes. So all that revenue is then going to be taken out of the school districts, which are already hurting for money. So there's going to be a ripple effect.
That ripple effect is creating economic dead zones nationwide, according to this congressman.
Because this program provides perverse disincentives to home ownership and to home improvement, which over decades have effectively turned whole swaths of formerly vibrant urban neighborhoods into virtual ghost towns.
Higgins made those comments last year at a House committee meeting on transportation and infrastructure. His criticism was scathing.
The National Flood Insurance Program is, both in its design and execution, the worst federal program that I have encountered in my time in the United States House of Representatives. Many communities across America pay this mandatory flood tax and see no benefit.
17 states across the country have reported complaints over FEMA's new mapping program. California is one of the last to receive the new mapping designations. Many Oxnard residents found out last summer at a community meeting. They thought it was the first day of the 6-month public comment period to challenge FEMA's new maps.
Tonight is the official public comment period, the beginning of the public comment period on the map, the draft flood insurance rate map, the digital flood insurance rate map.
This is the official kickoff of the public comment period. I said, good, we can comment, and then FEMA shut them down and said, no, this is the end of it.
There's a little bit of a misnomer. I want to make a bit of a correction. The maps, we went back and forth with your community and we did provide a comment period. That comment period has ended.
People were very upset, but floored. It's like, how could somebody have dropped the ball like this?
Like the residents of South LA, homeowners in Oxnard are upset they were never notified they were in a flood zone until it was too late to do anything about it. Now they've hired an attorney and they're preparing a lawsuit, saying they were denied due process.
We found out we have what's considered a very good case.
In the meantime, they're asking FEMA to delay the rollout of the new maps, scheduled for early 2010. So far, FEMA hasn't budged, and residents are losing patience.
Since everybody in the country is within walking distance of an earthquake fault, we're wondering, are we mandated to buy earthquake insurance? No. You know, if you want it, it's available. And it costs far less than flood insurance.
To be involved.
If and when the Oxnard residents get their day in court, communities across the country will be watching the outcome. I'm Judy Muller for SoCalConnected.
If you want to see the flood zones in your area, check out an interactive map on our website at kcet.org/SoCal.